This episode is in partnership with Fantasy WSL, the biggest fantasy game in women's football. Fantasy WSL is where you can manage your own squad and earn points for real-life performances. Rise through the ranks in leagues against your friends and fellow managers. Keep up to date with the WSL results and fixtures with game week and live match notifications. Head to fantasywsl.net or download the app from your app store and get started today. Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. On today's episode we're going to be having a look ahead to the game week 14 fixtures, including a North London derby. We're going to be taking your questions on social media and having a look ahead to Fantasy WSL this weekend. I'm your host, Sam Stattorino.
And I'm Tom Maher.
Yes, welcome listener. It is Wednesday the 12th of February as we're recording with myself, Sam Stattorino, host today, and I've got Tom with me. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, thank you for coming on. I should say as well, Tom has been a super sub this evening because unfortunately, as you might have heard either on social media or on the last episode, we were supposed to have Jamie Spanger on this evening, but unfortunately she's a bit under the weather. Can't make it tonight. Hope you get well soon, Jamie. But she has recommended Tom with flying colours to be a super sub. And yeah, here we are. Tom has stepped in with a couple hours notice.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, Jamie, as well for recommending me. It's big shoes to fill. But, you know, we've got the Subway sub of the week as well. That's what I hope that I can get that crown today.
Well, I mean, you're certainly the sub of the week on this pod.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, like I said in the intro, we're going to be having a look at the games coming up this weekend, especially that North London derby. We're going to be taking some of your questions on social media and taking a look at Fantasy WSL as per. But looking ahead to this weekend, obviously all 6 games this weekend are on Sunday. The weekend starts with the WSL's best and worst defence facing off as Man Utd host Crystal Palace. Then it's the North London derby. Chloe Kelly will be hoping to make her debut in a potentially sold-out Emirates Stadium. It was a great transfer window for both Chelsea and Everton in January. These two meet at Kingsmeadow at 2 p.m. There's Leicester and Aston Villa. They are both treading water this season, currently in 11th and 10th respectively. A win for either side here could do wonders in their hopes to avoid relegation. West Ham are hosting a Brighton side that have lost 5 of their last 6 away games in the WSL this season. And finally, it is the neutrals' favourite, Manchester City. They will be hosting a Liverpool side that has kept clean sheets in their last 3. But we'll be starting with the game in North London. North London derby, 12:30 on Sunday at the Emirates is Arsenal hosting Spurs, 3rd versus 6th in the league. This is a game that I think is definitely the one that's catching people's eye this weekend. Arsenal could go up to 2nd, only if United lose at home to Palace this weekend. They could also drop to 4th and out of the Champions League spots if they lose this game. Spurs, on the other hand, could jump Brighton to get to 5th place with a win, or they could fall behind Liverpool into 7th if they lose. The reverse fixture this season was a 3-0 Arsenal win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Alessia Russo scoring very early on, followed by goals from Frida Arnhem and Stina Blackstenius. It is still Arsenal's biggest away win of the season, and it's also Spurs' biggest home loss this season. So a fixture that will definitely be in both minds of these two teams. Tom, did you sort of see anything from that previous game that you think might influence this game? Do you think it will be a similar sort of fixture? Do you think it will be a comfortable Arsenal win or something a bit closer?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting one. You have to fancy Arsenal in their current form, and you know Spurs. I think it's been a bit disappointing from them recently. I mean, obviously they got those 2 wins in January, which earned Robert Villaham a WSL Manager of the Month nomination. But I think those 2 wins didn't really tell the whole story. You know, they had a shot on target against Leicester as an own goal that gave them the win, a mistake by Janina Leipzig. And then against Crystal Palace, it was very, very late that they got their winner there. And they're perhaps a bit lucky to get that winner. And I think Arsenal are a different team to the one they were last year. You know, obviously with Renée Slegers, she's one of the big aspects of her as a manager is that she instills problem solving in her players. She wants them to figure out the problems on the pitch. If they working against a low block, they need to figure it out, as well as her giving them the instructions at the start, of the game. She's not going to wait. Perhaps that was one of the things that Jonas really struggled with at Arsenal. So I think that Arsenal will win. But I think by virtue of the crowd, it's going to be a really exciting game and a really, really good one for women's football in general, to be honest, especially after the last couple of weeks. It'll be nice to just see a huge crowd and hopefully a brilliant game to go alongside it.
Yeah, I think like you say, it's going to be a really good one for the women's game generally. Last I saw, they'd hit the 50,000 mark in terms of tickets sold. Obviously, the Emirates, I think, is just over 60 in terms of capacity. So that's a really good sign that people are getting to these games. Because I think you do see sometimes you get the less marketed games is probably the best way of saying it. They'll be at the smaller stadiums, they still won't sell out, or they'll be in the huge stadiums, and you'll barely get a quarter of the sort of one side, I guess, of the pitch full. Whereas this game, it's going to be an absolute barn burner, I guess. It's obviously got the North London derby element to it too, which helps getting people in. You mentioned that you probably think Arsenal will win, and I think the stats go, in terms of their head-to-head in previous years, the stats go alongside you. These two sides have met 15 previous times in competitive games. Arsenal have won 13 of those. There's been one draw, and obviously Spurs won one, which was the game last season. Arsenal at home against Spurs have played 9 times and have won all 9, 38-7 on aggregate. So that's about a 4-1 win on average for Arsenal against Spurs at home. I think this is going to be, I think firstly, there's going to be a bit of a strikers complex in this game because Alessia Russo and Beth England are currently joint second top scorer in the WSL with 7 goals apiece. Both of them have opened the scoring 4 times in the WSL this season. I think it's really interesting because obviously the England squad came out recently for the Lionesses. I certainly was. Were you perhaps a bit surprised that Beth England wasn't included?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've seen with Stattorino Weigmann before. I remember in the lead up to the World Cup in 2023, Bethany England was scoring for fun for Tottenham, and she didn't seem to be in any squad. Like every time, people were looking for Bethany England's name in the squad, and then obviously she got in to that squad eventually. So yeah, I was surprised certainly because especially when you've got, like you said, England's got as many goals as Russo this season. She's in second, and she scored quite a few of them recently. Obviously, the double against Crystal Palace. So yeah, I was surprised. I think she would certainly have. I think she'll certainly be in the running in future squads. Maybe it's the opponents that England are coming up against. Playing Spain. It's a game that maybe England might be isolated in at Wembley. So maybe it's more the opponents. That's the reason she hasn't made the squad. But yeah, it definitely raised a few eyebrows.
Yeah, I think there's definitely sort of space for one forward to come in. Obviously, Nikita Paris has been the player that's taken that spot, which I quite like to see. I quite like her as a player. She seems like a very sort of very fun person as well. Good personality to have within the squad. So it's no bad blood against Nikita Paris. I think she's very deserving of a call up, but I think England will feel a little bit aggrieved to not be in there as well. Obviously, Russo and England, as I've mentioned, are the 2 top scorers or second top scorers in the WSL this season. Katie McCabe is the second top player in terms of assists. She has 4, only 1 behind Lauren Hemp and Celine Bizet, both on 5. She has obviously generally been starting in that left back role so far this season. We know that she can move into a winger because I think I think she's a bit better on the wing than she is at left back, especially with Arsenal having a lot of options in defence now as well. I'm intrigued to see how you think Arsenal are going to line up, especially within that sort of front 4. Obviously, they tend to play like a 4-2-3-1 kind of formation. Do you think we'll see Russo out wide again with Stina through the middle? Do you think Caitlin Ford's going to be coming back? Obviously, she played in the FA Cup game against London City Lionesses. Do you think Holly Kelly's finally going to get her debut? How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, I think it would be a real baptism of fire to put Chloe Kelly in on this one. But I mean, who better than Chloe Kelly to deal with that? I think that we'll see Russo through the middle again. I think maybe looking back at the fixture at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium earlier this year, that's how they started. And like you said, Russo scored really early on. And when Black Sinias came on later in that game, she kind of put the icing on the cake and finished it off for Arsenal for 3-0. So I think that makes sense, given that it's worked already this season. It was quite a comfortable win for Arsenal as well in the end, aside from that Bethany England chance with that brilliant save from Van Domselaar. So I think they'll take a lot of confidence from that victory. I think that we'll probably see Russo through the middle, and I would imagine that it'll be Ford and Mead on the wings, and then in the midfield three, you'll see Caldente, Manham, and Kira Cooney-Cross, who obviously has just been named Arsenal's Player of the Month today, and deservedly so. So I think that's how Arsenal will line up in an attacking sense. I think that we'll see McCabe back at left back as well.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think Russo through the middle is definitely what I'm hoping for, because she is in my fantasy team this week, and I'm probably going to
Me too, captain.
But I've got Katie McCabe as well, so I'm hoping she's going to be bombing forward and getting a few assists. I think there's a really good shout that we actually do see a Chloe Kelly debut from the start. As we know, she can deal with big games. She likes the sort of, for lack of a better word, like attention of it. She likes being in the middle of those big arenas. I wouldn't be surprised if she starts, especially with Ford only just coming back from injury recently. And potentially not quite being up to full fitness. Obviously, playing against London City Lionesses, they're probably better than most of the Championship sides. They're certainly in that sort of race for the WSL, and I think are probably better than some of the WSL sides, especially those near the bottom. But so that's a good test for her to get back to full fitness and see sort of for the Arsenal coaches to see how she's doing. But I do think we might end up seeing a Chloe Kelly start. Probably Beth Mead on the other side, because I don't see why you wouldn't start Beth Mead. She's in good form. She got an assist obviously last time out. She's no reason to not have her around. And then probably Caldente around Cooney-Cross, and I think Marnham's probably going to start. So I agree with you, because I think Arsenal are going to be kind of dominating this game a bit. I think they're much more likely to have more of the ball. But I do feel a bit for Leah Valti, because I think she was excellent in midweek, and any time that she plays, I think she tends to be very good. I think she's quite an underrated player. I think she's been in really good form when she's come on recently, but I just don't think this is the sort of game where they necessarily need her. I think with Arsenal going quite heavy on the attack, I think Marlon's probably more likely the option.
Agreed. Yeah, I love the thought of a Chloe Kelly debut. I mean, that is really, that's going to be some prime Barclays action, I'd say, there.
We love a bit of prime Barclays. I want to see something like, do you remember the Chloe Kelly's post of never much love when we go OT?
Oh, yes.
I really would want to see something like that. She's probably much better at me than creating Instagram captions, but something like that. Just
I wouldn't take it personally, Sam. She's better than most of us at Instagram captions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not trying to compete. Talking of Spurs, though, Spurs did get their first away win of the WSL season last time out, or in their last away game, I should say, against Crystal Palace. If I was a Spurs player, I think I'd be really struggling for motivation this season. They are 10 points away from being in the top three, and realistically aren't really in that conversation. They're 11 points off relegation, aren't really in that conversation. They've just sort of got to do well enough to stay far away from that. They're out of the Subway Cup. They're out of the FA Cup. I don't really know what they've got to play for so much this season without just thinking ahead to next season, which is obviously so far away. If you're a player at Spurs, what is motivating you at the moment to keep playing?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for those players who are in with a chance of making Euro 2025, that's going to be a huge golden goose at the end of the season for them to keep on performing. I think you want to be performing. Obviously, no player should need any motivation to perform in North London derby. That's like that's going to give it could give you legendary status if you score a winner in that game or play well. I think it's very much up to Robert Villaham to get that out of them. The defeats in both cups are so disappointing because, West Ham in the League Cup or the Subway Cup, they'd beaten West Ham in the league in the same fixture. And the same goes for Everton in the FA Cup. They'd beaten Everton in the league early in the season in December, I think. So, that's going to be so disappointing for them. I think maybe if Robert Villaham is trying to get them to build it, like Robert Villaham talks a lot about, the project and moving forward. So, maybe the second half of the season will be about trying new things out for next season. When they play the big teams, they've struggled, but they do try. They go for it. They don't sit back as much as other teams do against the bigger teams. So, it's going to be difficult motivation wise for the rest of the season because, like you say, they are caught in this mid-table purgatory of sorts. But I think this also speaks to something in the league really as well, like just to have a few more places, European places, obviously with this new competition coming in. It might be next year or the year after, sort of I think it might be the Women's UEFA Cup, they're calling it. So similar to the Europa League and the men's side, that's going to give more of a motivation to sides like Tottenham in the future, or in the position that Tottenham are in now in future seasons. And when you think about relegation as well, I think we really do need a second relegation spot and a second promotion spot, because these, like last year with Bristol, I think Bristol ended on 6 points. So, the relegation battle can be over before it started, really. So I think maybe it's not all about the disappointment for Tottenham, and some of it's about the league maybe making it more interesting for these teams that are in between relegation and too good to go down, but don't have enough to challenge the top four.
Yeah, I agree. I think the new season, the new European competition that's coming in, I think it's the 26-27 season that it starts. Like you say, this sort of the Europa League equivalent from the men's side, which I think is really ideal for the game. I think it's really good because I think we see a lot personally as well, sort of, as not personally necessarily, but from an English standpoint, we see a lot about the WSL, we see a bit about the Champions League, and we don't really see those sort of next teams down. In Spain, for example, we see a lot about Barcelona, we see a bit about Real Madrid, and we don't really see too much of the rest of the teams. Same kind of in France, same in, not really in Italy at all yet, and Germany as well, where they've got a really close, I think it's 4-way tie for the Bundesliga title this season. So I think having more places is really going to help. I also think having an extra spot at least for relegation is definitely something I've spoken about on the pod before. I'm really for it. I think in a 12-team league to only have one spot is a bit silly. I don't think it just allows enough movement. I think it sort of not quite closes the league off because obviously there is an opening, but I think there should be a bigger opening to get more teams from the Championship and WSL moving around. I also think that as I've mentioned before on the pod, I think expansion is ideal. I think I'd really welcome moving to at least 14 teams soon, and then see from there. Do we need 16? Do we then need 18 in the future? But yeah, I think 14. My ideal at the moment, I would say 14 teams, 2 relegation spots, and a playoff spot, where sort of third from bottom would play third place in the championship, that kind of thing, in a playoff game. That would be my perfect way of doing it.
But I like the sound of that. Set up at Wembley as well, the final. My gosh, that'd be fun.
Exactly. More marketing opportunity as well for the women's game. Who loses? No one loses, other than maybe another WSL team. But
yeah, they'll have the chance to go up next season, and more of a chance to go up when they go down as well.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, there's that sort of yo-yo effect could come in. We'll move on to the next game I want to talk about this weekend, which is Man United hosting Crystal Palace. Before we actually get to the game, I want to highlight Siobhan's dealing of a sort of situation on live radio last week. She was, someone tried to shun her down, especially when she was talking about Manchester United women and women's football generally, saying that no one cares. This was from I won't name him, but a sort of former footballer turned pundit on TalkSport. But I thought she did a really good job, basically, of not just doing her job as a presenter, but correcting him, saying that she cared about the team and the sport, generally just shut him down and made the point that there are a lot of people out there that care about the women's team. And, yes, they don't make as much money as the men, for example, but that's not the only point around it. It's about representation. It's about giving 50% of the fans, the little girls as well as the little boys, something to look up to and something to care about. I think she did a really good job of it. And it was really nice to see United fans at Saturday's FA Cup game as well, holding up the We Care signs. Not sure who it was. I think it might have been the supporters group. Printed loads of these out for the fans to hold up. Thought that was a really good touch as well.
Oh yeah, she was brilliant. And I couldn't agree more, Sam, that you said that really well. That's really well said. Brilliant from the fans as well to show their support. I mean, they show it every week. The United fans are fantastic. They have such a good away following as well. And, it's kind of overshadowed the fact that it is good that United's women's team are included in it because, in the recent news with Sir Jim, we weren't sure whether Sir Jim Ratcliffe, we weren't sure how serious they were going to be about the women's team. So, it's overshadowed that. And I think Anita Asante, former Arsenal, Aston Villa and England defender, she spoke really well on 5 Live this week on this point. She said that like you said, I won't name him, but that TalkSport pundit and former footballer doesn't speak for global football fans. And those opinions that he espoused are exactly the opinions that have held the game back for so long. So, I think all respect and praise to Siobhan. She did fantastically.
Yeah, she did a great job with it. And glad to see that she's not been. I think it was one of those things that obviously TalkSport are a radio station that brings in a lot of the time, a certain type of person. And I think that's the sort of thing that they could have made a decision to say, okay, like you shouldn't really be talking back to the pundits in this sort of way or something. But actually they seem to just have carried on business as usual, which I really like. And she's been given, I've seen quite a lot, probably more than normal airtime since. Which is really good. But anyway, back to the football. Manchester United against Palace. They're kicking off the WSL this weekend at midday on Sunday. It is second in the league, Man United. They are hoping to avoid a defeat, hold on to that second place, but will obviously be hoping to close that 7-point gap on Chelsea. Palace could move level on points with 11th. They're obviously 12th at the moment. They could move on level on points with 11th place Leicester, although would need an 11-goal swing to get out of that relegation spot. So against Manchester United, that I think are conceded something like 5 goals in the WSL this season. They are the lowest conceded. So they've got the best defence in the league. I don't think 11-goal swing is going to happen. These two teams have faced each other 3 times before, Manchester United winning all 3. 2 of those were in the 18-19 championship season, where Manchester United won 12-0 on aggregate over the 2 games. And the other one was in the reverse fixture away at Crystal Palace, where Man U won 1-0 thanks to a Grace Clinton goal just before half-time. And there is a bit of a race on for that second and third spots this season, because we've got Manchester United, Manchester City and Arsenal all trying to get in those Champions League spots. And obviously they can't all fit in, because unless something ridiculous happens at Chelsea and they drop out, only 2 of these teams are going to fall into that second and third. One of them's going to finish 4th. One of them's going to miss out. Who do you think that's going to be? Do you have a particular prediction about who's definitely going to finish in or out of the European spots this season?
It's such a tricky one. It really is hard to call. It really is hard to call because, I think United and Arsenal probably be happy with their seasons at the moment, especially with what Arsenal have come back from initially with Jonas leaving, and to be in the position they are right now. I think they'd be happy with that. And then United have surprised me really. I think they've been so good defensively, like you said, conceded the least goals in the league. I think that what could be tricky for United is the fact that they have, I think their last 3 games are Chelsea at home, City at home, and then Arsenal away. So if they haven't secured their place by then, I think they could be in real trouble because, they don't have a great record against Chelsea. Obviously, they've had a great win against City, so and then Arsenal, they don't have the best record against Arsenal either. So I mean, yeah, I want to say City in fourth, but I just keep on thinking about Bunny Shaw, and I can't. It feels like I can't bring myself to say it. But I think out of those three, I think I'd probably guess City in fourth, even with Bunny Shaw. Just I think they've been a bit more unpredictable, and they've shown a few frailties in their squad. That doesn't take too many injuries for them to start struggling. And if they, without Alex Greenwood, their defence is really having a tough time. Alexandri looks a bit lost without Greenwood, I think. But let's see how it goes. But I think if you had to push me for one, I'd say City right now. Sam, what do you think?
For me, it's, and I'm not just saying this from an Arsenal bias, but it is between Man City and Man United as to who's going to get that fourth spot. I think Man City are very reliant on a few really good players, and I'm talking Alex Greenwood, Giroud, Bunny Shaw, and Lauren Hemp, probably those four. I think they're trying to address that a little bit with a bit more depth. I think they've got Carolyn in, for example, this summer. But when those players or a combination of those players are out, it really hits them hard. You think last season they were so close to winning the title. Bunny Shaw gets injured, all of a sudden they lose to Arsenal, and then obviously it goes downhill from there for them. This season they've had something similar, where, as you mentioned, Alex Greenwood was injured, and their defense has just kind of gone to shit. And they just conceded so many goals. I think it's something like, I'm just looking at their fixtures now, it's something like 10 goals in the last 3 games. 2 to Villa, 4 to Arsenal, and then, 4 to Manchester United before that. 10 goals in 3 games is a lot of goals to concede. That's twice as many as Man United conceded this season. They're not doing great defensively, although other than Chelsea, they have scored the second most goals in the league. So their forwards are still getting goals. Mary Fowler is obviously in really hot form at the moment. But Manchester United are, I think, a team that, the reason I say I put them in this bracket as well and not Arsenal is Mark Skinner has a reputation, and one that he has continued with as well, where he just doesn't rotate that much. He likes to use the same, especially starting 11, and then bring the same players off the bench a lot, which means that the same players are playing a lot, especially when you're going deep in competitions as well. That doesn't help. But I think they're going to struggle just as they go on throughout the season, because their players are going to get more tired. And it's just physiology, it's nothing the players can necessarily do about that. If you're getting played all the time, you can't help but just be lacking in energy. That's the reason I think Manchester United might drop down. Man City, I think if they can keep players like Bunny Shaw fit, sounds like Lauren Hemp's coming back to fitness. I don't think Alex Greenwood's going to be back this season. Giroud's another one, though. If they can keep her fit as well, I think they'll be all right. I think Arsenal will be all right because they've got depth. They haven't got the hardest fixtures either, unlike like you mentioned with Man United. So yeah, it's going to be one that I'm not going to call for certain until the end of the season. Obviously, Arsenal and Man United have that final day matchup as well. I am so ready for Chloe Kelly to score a 91st minute winner in that one. But we'll wait and see what comes then. It's probably a good moment to move on to Manchester City. I want to address their game against Liverpool. This one is 6:45, the final game on Sunday, and it's two teams in actually pretty good form. Liverpool have won their last 3 games, one in the WSL and 2 in the Cups. They've scored 8 goals in those 3 games and have kept 3 clean sheets. City, on the other hand, have won 4 of their last 5 games, winning 14-9 on aggregate. Both teams have scored in each of their last 5 games, which obviously hasn't happened for Liverpool in their last 3. But yeah, Manchester City are basically going with the idea of we're going to outscore you, and Liverpool are going for the idea of we're going to not concede and hopefully just snatch a couple of goals. So I think this could end up being quite an interesting matchup. Mary Fowler is a player that I really want to talk about. She has been in really hot form the last sort of 3 or 4 games. She has got 6 goals and 4 assists in the WSL this season. So 10 goal involvements in total, which is the joint most in the league with Bunny Shaw, which for a player that doesn't get that many headlines, she's not as famous as the Bunny Shaw and your Lauren Hemps and your Alessia Russos and people like that. She is the player with the most goal involvements in the league. kind of caught me by surprise when I saw that stat. Something I wanted to ask you is, with Bunny Shaw back, Miedemar's in really good form as well. Carolyn's been integrated into the squad. Do you think Mary Fowler is still going to be able to keep her spot? Because there's only so many places on the pitch that she can play.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I mean, when you lose a player like Bunny Shaw, like, you're looking to your squad, you're looking for someone to kind of fill that gap as much as you can, and you've kind of had both these players, Fowler and Miedema, chipping in really impressively. And Mary Fowler's done exactly what's been asked of her. You know, I mean, to your point about her goals and assists, I saw that she's the forward on Fantasy WSL with the most points this season, which took me by surprise too. That's so impressive. It really is. And I think she's done everything that she can do as far as keeping her spot is concerned. It's really up to Gareth Taylor. I mean, putting Bunny Shaw on the bench just feels wrong, doesn't it? I mean, I was talking to my sister today, and we were talking about who's her favourite WSL player, and she's an Arsenal fan, mind, and she said Bunny Shaw, because Bunny Shaw just brings joy wherever she goes, and like, I completely agree with that. What do you want in a football match? You want goals. You want somebody scoring hat tricks. And it's just such a brilliant moment when she came back, obviously with everything she's been through recently, and the racist abuse that she received. It's just such a lovely moment when she came on and nodded that goal in against Leicester at the FA Cup on the weekend. So I think I've gone a little bit off topic, but I think Fowler's done everything she can to keep her spot, and maybe she'll be moved out to the wing. But I think I'd be surprised if we didn't see Bunny back and maybe Miedema in the 10, and perhaps Carolyn on the wing and Fowler on the other wing, and Fujino potentially dropping out. But I think Gareth Taylor's really liked Fujino this season, and she's probably in the best form that I can remember her being in this season as well. Fujino, I think she looked really good against Arsenal in the League Cup last week as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you're Gareth Taylor, what does your front line look like, Sam?
I think my front line is going to be, I think I'm going to have Miedema in midfield alongside Gilroyd and Hasegawa. And then I think my front three is going to be Fowler and Carolyn out wide with Bunny Shaw through the middle. Because I think if Bunny Shaw is in the right headspace, obviously she's had some, she's obviously had reasons that she didn't want to play recently, which is perfectly understandable. If she's in the right headspace to play, she's obviously got the quality that she scores in pretty much every game she plays in. Mary Fowler's in the same kind of form at the moment. So is Viv Miedema. So I think those three have all got to play. And then it's between Fujino and Carolyn. I'm praying for Fujino because I've put her in my fantasy team this week to try and get those visionary points. I've not put Carolyn in. She was too expensive. But Fujino seems to be getting better and better. I think obviously coming over, because I think she was playing in Japan last season, there is a bit of like a Japanese contingent at Man City, which I think has helped her integrate. I think, if there was no Japanese speaking players, I think she'd really struggle. I don't know how good her English is. But obviously she's got Yui Hasegawa, she's got Yamashita, and obviously Risa Shimizu, although she's out with an ACL still, she is still at the club, and they seem to post on social media a lot together. So they've obviously got a really good tight-knit group there. And Fujino is going from strength to strength. She's already got a couple of assists so far this season. I think she will go on to better things. I think for Gareth Taylor, it's just a case of you've got to keep it rotated. There are big games coming up for Man City. Obviously, they've got Liverpool and Spurs in the next couple of weeks, which are games you would expect them to get through. And then there's the game, FA Cup game versus Villa. And then there's a couple of games against Chelsea, which we'll come to shortly. And they've got Manchester United later on in the season as well. It might be worth thinking for him about which of the players in the lineup are those big game players, because Carolyn strikes me as a player that has been brought in to play in the big games. To not, she's not there because they need to get a goal against Crystal Palace. She's not there because they need an extra way of trying to score against West Ham. She's there because she's a player that can compete with the likes of your Chelseas and your Manchester Uniteds. So I think she's going to be more likely to be played in the big games, which means Fujino is probably more likely to be played in the games that not necessarily aren't big, because playing against Liverpool and Spurs and Aston Villa are still decent teams. I think she's more likely to play in those games. But yeah, with the form Mary Fowler's in, she's got to have a spot. With the form, well, not form, but the quality that Bunny Shaw has, she's got to have a spot. Same goes with Viv Meadham. I'll copy and paste that. It then doesn't leave that much room. But yeah, the other thing I've sort of leaned into it a little bit there, was that City and Chelsea are having a little bit of a just games against each other repeatedly. So I think within the space of 12 days it is. They're playing each other 4 times. So they're playing each other, I did write down, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday. That is in the Subway Cup final first. Then they've got the first leg of the Champions League quarter final, which is at Man City. Then they're playing in the WSL at Man City again on the Sunday. And then they are playing the second leg of the Champions League at Chelsea. Now, I want to know your opinion on who's winning what. My prediction, I'll go first this time, because I've made you go first pretty much every time so far. I'll be nice, sings it's your first go. My prediction of this is that I think Chelsea are going to win the Subway Cup final. I think Bonpastor is going to get a trophy at the first time of asking. Then the Champions League one is a difficult one. I think at Man City, City are going to know they've got to go out there and score some goals, because they're not going to get loads at Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, I assume. Bridge anyway. So I think that game's probably going to be a draw, something like a 1-1 or a 2-2. Then there's the WSL game at City. Chelsea are going to be thinking about the Champions League game 3 or 4 days later. That's their big game. If they've got to not throw one game, but if they've got to put a better team out for one game, they're going to go for the Champions League. They can afford to drop 3 points to Man City in the WSL and still win the title. So I think Chelsea are going to play a slightly weaker side in the WSL game. City won't, because Bunny Shaw plays every game. Viv Meadham is going to play every game. Mary Fowler, if she's still in good form by then, is going to be playing every game. So my prediction is going to be Chelsea win the Subway Cup final, a draw in the first Champions League leg, City win the game at home in the WSL, and then Chelsea win the game at home in the Champions League second leg and end up going through. So Chelsea into the cup final and through to the next round of the Champions League. City get one over them in the WSL. Chelsea lose their unbeaten streak, but probably still win the league. Yeah. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think you can't be too far off the mark there, I reckon. I think, it's really interesting. I mean, there was a time where it could have even been 5 games in a row, I think, if they'd drawn each other in the FA Cup, which would have been, that starts to make your eyes water, doesn't it? I mean, they'll be sick of the sight of each other by the end of this run of games. But I think, it's interesting. I was at Sonia Bonpastor's press conference last week, and, I asked her about how, when you play a team this frequently, like how do you go about that? And I thought a couple of things that she said really struck me, and one of them was that Lyon's side last season played PSG about 7 times, I think, and a lot towards the back end of last season. And I think she feels that suits her, having that experience of playing the same team so often at the elite level, that suits her. And I think, like you said, different competitions have different emphases. So, emphases, or so the final, they're going to need, both teams need a win, whereas the WSL, maybe a draw is going to suit both of them. And then in the Champions League first leg, it's you're looking at, they're going to have to look at squad rotation, and that's why I think your point about that WSL game against City, between City and Chelsea, is such a good one, because Chelsea are going to have to heavily rotate. But we've heard today that Sam Kerr might be back, which is genuinely scary if Sam Kerr comes back into this unbeaten Chelsea side. I think you're certainly onto something. I think Chelsea will win the Subway Cup final. I agree with you there. I think in the first leg, City might win the first leg. And then I think in the WSL it'll be a draw. And I think the second leg, Chelsea are going to come back and knock City out. That would be those are my predictions. But I think you're making some good points, certainly about the WSL there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting whatever happens, and I'm definitely going to be sitting down to watch as many of those games as I can.
Absolutely.
Definitely the Champions League games as well. I think they're the ones that I know this pod is all about the WSL, but the Champions League games are the ones that I'm really interested in to see what happens there. Also, the WSL game is actually on my dad's birthday, so I'm using that as an excuse why I'm not going to be able to watch it. But the Champions League one's definitely in for, and I'm really interested to see what happens there because I think Bompastor's been brought in to win the Champions League. If she wins the Subway Cup final, whoop-de-doo, they're not going to mark that against her, but they'll, that's not that much of an achievement for Chelsea. Winning the WSL obviously is something they want to keep up that streak, and yeah, the Champions League is where it's at. They probably got the best squad in the Champions League this year, especially taking Kira Walsh away from Barcelona. Will they win it still? Well, it's a cup competition, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But that is sort of the three Champions League chasing clubs and what their games are this weekend. The other games that we haven't quite touched on are Chelsea at home to Everton. I think that's obviously, as any game that Chelsea play in, is probably going to be a relatively straightforward one for them. Leicester versus Aston Villa at 3:00 is another one that's really interesting because these two teams, I don't think will get relegated, but they are flirting with it at the moment. They both need a win there. And then West Ham against Brighton is the other one. Sort of two kind of mid-table teams this season. Games we're not quite going to touch on them this week because just haven't got enough time, to be honest. So we're going to take a quick break there, and then we're going to get into some of your questions that you've written in with. Hello, listener. Welcome back to Decoding the WSL. We are moving on to some of the questions that you've written in with, and there's one main one that I wanted to highlight this week, which is from T on X, who asks, are there any younger WSL players at lower clubs who could attract big moves in the summer? Well, there's one main one that I was quite glad this question came in actually when I saw it, because I put a post out a couple of days ago before the England squad went out as well about Ruby Mace. She has obviously come through at Arsenal. She spent time at Man City as well. Obviously had a loan period at Leicester and is now there permanently because she just didn't seem to break through properly at either of those sort of Champions League level clubs in Arsenal and Man City. She's gone to Leicester probably to get in an actual first 11 and play more. And that has been, for the player, an absolutely phenomenal transfer because she's playing every week. The first Leicester female player to break into the Lionesses squad. And I think she's going from strength to strength. I think she's a big reason that Leicester are doing so well defensively this season. They do have quite a good back four, especially those middle two of generally Howard and Thibaut, with Leipzig in goal as well. But Ruby Mace sitting just in front, sometimes dropping into a back three, I think has been really good this season. And although I don't think her contract runs out in the summer, but I would not be surprised to see one of the sort of quite bigger teams being in for her. I don't think Chelsea would, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Man City going back in for her. Wouldn't be surprised to see someone like an Aston Villa or a Liverpool maybe. Whether she sees them as a bigger side or not than Leicester, who knows? But I think she might be one that might move on in the summer. What do you think? Do you think Ruby Mace is a good shout? Do you think there are any others in particular?
Yeah, I think Ruby Mace is a cracking shout. I'm just thinking back even to this last FA Cup week when obviously it wasn't the result that Leicester wanted, but that driving run through the midfield for Leicester's goal and then just perfect pass was just fantastic. Yeah, she's really done well. She deserves her place in the side in the England squad. I mean, so yeah, I completely agree with that. She would have been on my list. I think the player that I would in particular highlight would be, I've seen a lot of West Ham this season. I really like the look of Anouk Denton. I think she's been fantastic. She's another one who used to play for Arsenal. I think she's just been brilliant in that West Ham back line. She's been able to bomb forward and cover as well. It's just, it seems like the whole package really. And West Ham have had good home form. They've only lost to Chelsea and Arsenal this season at home. And I think Anouk Denton, the way that she's played, that goal against Crystal Palace a goal of the season contender really in that 5-2 win at the Chigwell Construction Stadium. she's one that's really, really impressed me this season. Yeah, for sure. And I think if Crystal Palace go down as well, I think Abby Larkin could be one that would attract some interest too. So just throw her name in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would be stopping me saying Nuke Denton as well is I know her and Amatiziak signed new contracts, I don't know, a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, I think, until I think the summer of 2026. So it's not ages away, but it's certainly enough that if they were to go in the summer, they're going to be attracting a fee. But to be honest, I know Tiziak's not quite as young. I think she's about 24. I think Denton, I think, is 21, something like that. But they'll be players that they won't want to play in the Championship. They're better than the Championship, to be honest. So if West Ham do end up going down, there'll be players that will be definitely looking to move on. Although I don't know if they will go down, but we'll see what comes. Two other players that I want to highlight as well are two Crystal Palace players. One of them is on loan, which is Lexi Potter. I think she's a really interesting one. She's only 19, I think, at the moment still. She might even still be 18. She was on loan there last season in the Championship, obviously helped them get promoted, and has been playing there this season as well. I think she's sort of one of the youngsters with the most minutes this season. She's basically missed the games against Chelsea that she's not allowed to play in because she's on loan from Chelsea. But if Crystal Palace end up going down, which is looking like they probably will, I think she's a player that will definitely move to another club, at least on loan, might even get snapped up because she is far too good to play in the Championship, but is not good enough to break into a Chelsea side that has Erin Cuthbert and Kira Walsh and Sjöka Nusken and this sort of catalogue of players that they've got there. I think she'd be a player that could end up, if Ruby Mace is to go, could end up filling a void there. I think she'd suit Liverpool's style really well. And I think she'd do really well under Matt Beard. I think she might even do well at West Ham. Obviously, that wouldn't be too much trouble for her as well if she was to go from South London. So she's a player I can definitely see moving on. And another one is Mikato. She was one that to be honest, hadn't heard of before she came to the WSL this summer. I saw a couple of articles and a couple of interviews with her, sort of about her journey, and she has, I think, probably been one of Crystal Palace's best players this season. She is, don't quote me on this off the top of my head, I think she might be Crystal Palace's top scorer in Fantasy WSL this season, which for a player that was not known to a lot of WSL watchers and was, I think, 4 million, the cheapest you can be at the start of the season. She's just having a really good campaign. She always just seems to be in the right place at the right time, score a good goal. And again, I'm not saying she's going to go to Chelsea or Arsenal or City or something like that, but I could see her moving to definitely a WSL team if Palace do end up getting relegated.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stock in Mikato as well. I think that she, I could see her moving to, at some point in her career, to one of those teams at the top. I think she was named in the Sweden squad this week, which is brilliant for her. Hopefully she'll be trying to make it into that Euro 2025 squad. And, it's interesting with Lexi Potter as well. I thought she probably had her best game of the season for Crystal Palace against Man United in the reverse fixture. She was really impressive in that game. So, again, two really good picks, I think.
So there you go, T. Hopefully that's your question answered. There's a few young WSL players at lower clubs that will attract big moves in the summer. And there's definitely more than we've mentioned there. But let's move on to the Fantasy WSL segment. I'm not going to talk too much about how I did this week because, once again, I did not do very well. I compared myself last week to Brighton, and I will keep that up because I was really good before Christmas. And since Christmas, I have been really average. I've not been rubbish, but I've been pretty much bang on average, like the average score each week. I got 40 points, which I think about 24 of those came from 3 players. But I did beat the Scout. I was really I was honoured, I will say, Fantasy WSL. Thank you for having me play against the Scout. I think Connor Roberts, friend of the pod, was the only other person that's played against the Scout so far this season, and he lost. So I might be the first person to ever beat the Scout, which is, I'll have that on my gravestone. Thank you, Shannon O'Brien, for putting me up to victory, because you definitely saved my squad when I put Kiko Seika in there, not knowing that she was out injured. So I'd say overall, I had a positive game week last week. How did you get on?
Yeah. God, I didn't know I was having a podcast with Fantasy WSL royalty. Beating the Scout, that is huge. That's huge. Yeah, I did okay last week. I think I got the captaincy call wrong. I went for Nikita Paris against Crystal Palace, which, yeah, I feel a bit hard done by, but it didn't work out. I got about 50 points, I think. 50. That leaves me sitting around 200, 250, I think, which, I'm very happy with. I'll take that.
I've been 250 in the world.
Yeah, I think so. So it's, I'll take it. It'd be, I feel like I'm at that point where if I'm going to go any higher up the table, I need to pick a visionary captain who scores a hat trick. Really, I feel like if I can finish in the top 200, I'll be very happy with that.
Yeah, I would be. As someone that has dropped from, I think in the last 2 game weeks, I've dropped from, I think I was something like 80th in the world, which I was really happy with. And I'm now 181st, which I'm still pretty happy with. Still in the top 200. I think that's better than I did last year. And I'll be happy if I finish in the top 200. That is my target now, just to finish that, just high enough to stay up.
Yeah, even if we're 198th, 199th, we'll take it.
Yeah, that'll do. That'll do me. As long as it starts with a 1 and it doesn't have 4 figures. We did have a question from Fiona on Instagram who asked, will there be any double game weeks before the end of the season? And I can tell you now, there will be. There was a post from, I think his name is Shula FWSL, or something along those lines. Sorry if I've got it slightly wrong, on X. That although Fantasy WSL haven't put out an official schedule yet, because I think they're waiting on the WSL still, the Shula account on X was retweeted by, or reposted, I should say, by the Fantasy WSL account, which was to say that basically the Subway Cup final falls on the same weekend as game week 16. So Chelsea's game against Leicester and Man City's game away at West Ham need to be moved, and it's looking like they're both going to be in game week 15. So this one this weekend is game week 14. The following week, Chelsea, Leicester, West Ham and Man City all have double game weeks and will all then blank the following week. So there needs to be a bit of forward planning to see who you're going to pick, basically, who you're going to pick this week, who you're going to not have. It might be the sort of time where you start thinking about using I think it's called the clean sheet, which is the new, let me do that again. It might be the sort of time where you need to think about using clean slate, which is the new feature from Fantasy WSL that has come in, I think, in the last couple of weeks, which is basically, it's almost like a wild card in FPL, where you get to change your whole team, do whatever you like with it, make as many subs as you want in one game week. You can only do it once throughout the season. I have actually decided to use mine this week because the team that I have picked the last few weeks has obviously not been that good. I've been trying to make little amendments here and there, but it's not really worked. And there was a few big changes that I wanted to make. Bunny Shaw is obviously coming back to fitness. I wanted to get her in. I wanted to keep Alessia Russo in. I wanted to get Katie McCabe in. And also I wanted to sort of move some of my Chelsea players around because Chelsea and Man City, like I've said, are both getting that double game week and then none of them playing. I don't want to have too many players on those teams going forward. So going into this week, I've basically had to try and plan ahead to think what team's going to be good this week, get enough points next week in the double game week, but also not have too many Chelsea, Leicester, West Ham and Man City players, which I think I've got a right balance of, but we'll wait and see how many points I get this week because that will determine it. But looking ahead to this week, do you have any players in particular where you're like, you need to get that player in your team this week?
Yeah, I think we've already spoken about these two, but Mary Fowler, Bunny Shaw, one or the other, both, even if you feel so inclined. I also think couple of others I'd be thinking about. Vivasay, I think, is a good shout against Brighton. I think she's a little bit underrated, and she's, Brighton having difficulties keeping clean sheets. I think you mentioned earlier they're really struggling at the moment, especially away from home. And Asai is often on corner duties as well. She's got a few assists from corners, and she's just so lethal as well in front of goal. So I think Vivian Asai would be one that I'd be pointing people in direction towards. And then I do love a visionary pick. You'll learn this about me. I'm a big visionary pick fan, and I think a few that I didn't see Fujino, but Fujino is a great idea on the visionary pick side of things. But I think also, if you really want to roll the dice, Mairead Griffiths, who scored twice in the FA Cup for Manchester United off the bench, she's 0% ownership at the moment. If you're thinking longer term, then maybe Julia Bartel from Liverpool. She's 0.43, and she got an assist at the weekend again in the FA Cup against Rugby Borough. And then Mete Oroz, who is about 1.47, and also a visionary pick. I think those last two, Julia Bartel and Mete Oroz, are probably more long-term picks because their fixtures aren't brilliant this weekend. But yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah, I actually looked at Oroz earlier when I was picking my team, because obviously I've used the clean slate to pick anyone that I can. I actually went for a different Spurs player in midfield, who is a visionary, which is Olivia Holt, because she hasn't had many minutes. I think she's had something like 7 WSL minutes. But in those 7 minutes, obviously scored an absolute screamer of a free kick. I think she's one that will end up getting more minutes. We're not seeing Evelina Summanen coming back just yet. Holt, I don't think, has been brought in for like a one for the future. I think she's a transfer for now. So I think we can see her starting to play. Gino, obviously, like I said, I've got her in my team. She's only 6.5 million, plays quite a lot at Man City, and is a visionary as well as Holt. Player that I think is really, really good value at the moment. Obviously, you've got your high scorers like your Rousseau and your Shaw and people like that. But someone that I think is really good value at the moment is Jade Riviere. She is getting a lot of points for Manchester United because they can't stop keeping clean sheets. But she is only 4.5 million, so she's a really good pick alongside Falantillis Joyce, who was obviously keeping the clean sheets as a keeper. She's only 4.4 million. The other player that I'd say you have to have in this week is going to be Bunny Shaw. I think she's going to be back, and I think she's a really good option for a captaincy pick. Probably either her or Alessia Russo. Yeah, I think they're my main picks this week.
Yeah, I think the threat of having Russo potentially play on the wing would potentially make me lean towards Shaw if I was going for. But I don't have her in my team just yet, so I might do by the weekend. In fact, I probably will if I know what's good for me. But yeah, we'll see.
The only other player that I've considered as well is Mariona Caldente, who very annoyingly is listed as a forward. I've already got Russo, Shaw, and Fujino, so I don't have the money to replace Fujino with her, so I'd probably have to replace Russo if I was going to do it. It would free up a bit of dosh to spend elsewhere, but yeah, something to think about. I've got unlimited transfers. I played my clean slate, so I can pick whoever I want for the weekend. And I probably will do on Saturday when I just check in and say who's injured. It is always my luck. I do this with FPL as well. I wait until the day before the game starts, sometimes the morning if I really need to, and then make all my transfers because European games and cup games and just training just seems to kill players off. But
I would
there
love
we
to
are.
have the self control that you do, Sam. But if one of my players isn't doing well, they're out. They're out during the game. And I've got somebody else in.
I always try and like plan ahead a bit. I look at sort of, has this player got 3 good fixtures ahead? That's normally my way of looking at it. And it worked well the first half of the season. And now I've played my clean slate. Hopefully, I'll be back to winning ways. But yeah, that is it from us on Decoding the WSL this week. Thank you for joining us, listener. If you enjoyed today's episode, do make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And it does help as well if you can give a 5-star review because it goes a long way in helping others find the show. You can follow at Decoding the WSL on Instagram, and for even more stats and insights and things like that, follow me at Stattorino on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and now TikTok as well. Tom, this is your first appearance on the pod, obviously. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and where they can find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun, Sam, so I really appreciate it. I'm a women's football journalist. I write for the Halfway Line, and I'm also an editor at the Halfway Line. I write for the Sporting News too. And yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky and on Twitter or X. And my handle is just Tom Maher on Blue Sky, and then it's Tom Maher with a TOMMAHERSY on X. So yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, Sam.
Oh, thank you for coming on. You've definitely have been the super sub. And yeah, never know, you might get a start next time out. Thank you very much for coming on the pod today, Tom. It's been great to have you on. And thank you, obviously, listener, for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. And I will speak to you at the next one.